The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Jr., and with us today is Berth Lewis, the Executive Director of ACORN, New York. Hi, Bertha. Good to see you today.
How you doing, Dr. Roscoe?
Well, tell us about ACORN. Everybody uses that acronym. What does the acronym mean? What's the history? How'd you get started?
Well, the acronym stands for the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. And New York is a chapter of a national organization. We're in over 80 cities.
Which started in Chicago.
No. We started in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Is that right?
In 1970. So we'll be 36 years old next year. New York ACORN will be 25 years old next year. And we've been organizing low and moderate income folks to build power around their issues, whether it's education or health or banking or racism or injustice.
Wasn't your first foray in the area of housing?
Yes. I mean, a lot of people know us from housing, but ACORN really came out of the welfare rights movement. And those ladies that really spearheaded that movement said, you know what, we can't be a single issue organization. And so what we really need to do is to organize around poor people's issues. And so one of the main issues of poor people, of course, is housing. So a lot of people may know us as the housing people. Some people know us as the education people. Some people know us as the banking people because we fought redlining. And so in many different ways, low and moderate income folks with their issues are what we may become identified by.
Well, how do you identify which issue you're going to deal with at which time?
Well, you could think of us as a community union. We have neighborhood chapters that have leadership, and they actually sit down and decide which issue is not just a concern for a few, but a concern for all. And our members decide which issues we're going to fight for, which issues we will have a campaign.
You vote on it?
They vote on it. It's very democratic.
You have an assembly and you put up an issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's a membership-driven organization where poor people actually build power through their organized numbers. Because,
well, how do you get your funding?
Well, membership dues. Over 30% of our funding is from membership dues. Also, I have to write for grants like anyone else. We have ACORN Housing, in which we own and manage very affordable, low and moderate income units. So there's some earned income there. But for folks like us, it's always a struggle because we're always fighting against the system. And so sometimes the system is not going to fund you to fight against it.
Well, if someone who's watching this program says, well, look, I want to join ACORN, how do they go about it?
All they need to do is call 718-246-7900.
Okay, do that again, the number?
718-246-7900. And we will send an organizer directly to their home because we organize the old-fashioned way. Our organizers are on the ground, knocking on doors every day, and organizing neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block.
Well, how do you relate to unions? Because some of the techniques that you use are techniques that unions have used.
Well, as I say, we consider ourselves to be a community union. And we have very good allies in the labor movement. We believe that people should have collective bargaining. We believe that people should be organized. And so we've done a lot of collaborations with unions. Right now, ACORN was one of the founders of a community union political party called the Working Families Party. And that was something that was created in 1998 that's been a tremendous success.
What was the purpose of the Working Families Party?
Well, it really was, as its name implies, to really begin to put the issues of working people back on the political agenda. Most of us are Democrats and have been Democrats for a very long time. So instead of wailing and moaning about the failings of the Democratic Party, you get busy, you get organized, you decide what your issues are, and you actually have a piece of real estate on the ballot in which you can show the votes for people who want good jobs, good schools, and a good economy.
So Working Families is an alternative party
Absolutely.
to the Republicans and the Democrats,
Absolutely.
and I believe they have replaced the Conservative Party as the third line on
Well,
the
we've
New York
replaced
State
the Liberal Party.
The Liberal Party.
And the Green Party.
And the Green. What about the Conservative Party?
Well, the Conservative Party is still there, but there's a gubernatorial race coming
the
up.
Independence Party, the Lenore Fulani Party. Where do they fit in?
So what you have in New York State, the positioning on the ballot, if you're row A, which is the first, B,
based
C,
on the
D,
number of votes your party got in the previous gubernatorial election.
Absolutely. And so, because Pataki is our governor and is a Republican, the Republican line is A, the Democrats are B, and then you have C, D, conservative, independent, and then you have the Working Families Party, which is row E. When we started out in 1998, you could hardly find us. We were row H. So we've come a long way. And I think it's fair to say that part of the purpose of the party was to be a 365-day-a-year party, not to just be a party of personality, but of issues. We really did want to push errant Democrats back to the left and be progressive.
I was thinking about that. What about errant Republicans?
Absolutely.
Republicans aren't necessarily all bad and all conservative.
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with, have you ever supported, has the party ever supported a Republican candidate?
Absolutely. We've not as much as Democrats, but we certainly have supported Republicans that are upstate. And I do have to say, and I know this will sound strange, but New York Republicans are not exactly like your typical Midwestern or Washington, D.C. Republicans. You know, we had supported Nick Spano in the last election, which some people found controversial. However, our members in his district had always worked well with him. It supported us on the minimum wage, which we raised last year for 1 million New Yorkers. Now, no Republicans or Democrats had ever done it. So the Working Families Party took it on. That's the kind of issues that we take on. We have made some inroads with our support in Albany. For the first time ever, a district attorney of color, David Soares, ran on our line and beat an incumbent who had been a Republican. We also had a very young gentleman, and this is what I really like about what we've done with the party. A young man by the name of Corey Ellis ran strictly on the Working Families Party line and won for city council. So we're for good jobs, good education, and good government.
You know, the rhetoric is we want to improve the community, and what are the specific issues that Working Party, ACORN are concerned about now, maybe in terms of some kind of priority order?
Well, let me talk about two things, because ACORN is part of a coalition that forms the party. So I want to talk about ACORN for a moment and our statewide and citywide priorities. And I'm glad that you had mentioned housing, because we helped to form a coalition that put 8,000 people on the street in February of this year around affordable housing and the fact that we can't build enough housing for working people. We can't build enough housing for poor people, and we really need to make that a priority. We were happy to see housing and affordable housing being raised as a major issue in this last mayoral race, and I think it was partly due to our organizing work around it. Not only to build, but to preserve and to hold bad landlords accountable. People are living in deplorable conditions. The other issue that ACORN has been working on is education, as you know. Education, education, education. we had put together a collaborative in the Bronx, which really came out and formed a lead teacher, master teacher program. In Brooklyn, there's a coalition called the Brooklyn Education Collaborative, because in our middle schools, where children are going to go one way or the other, in our neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, there's no science labs or equipment. The other thing that we've started to do and mention in collaborations with labor is we've started to organize home child care providers. These folks have our most precious possessions very early in life. And do you know that out of 58,000 across New York State, some of these folks, who are mostly women and mostly women of color, and they are low and moderate income folks, earn sometimes less than $2 an hour taking care of our children. And so we want to make sure that they have a collective voice. So these are three of the things that we've been doing. But finally, and I have to mention this because it is timely, Little Rock, Arkansas was where ACORN started. Our first major city that we organized was New Orleans, Louisiana. Our national headquarters there was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina and then followed by Wilma. We lost 9,000 of our members. The folks that you saw on television from the 9th Ward, these were our members who are now scattered throughout the country. And the issues that have been highlighted around the racism and how people were treated in this very poor city of black and brown folks, we have taken up across the country, and we formed the ACORN Katrina Survivors Association, in which we're taking on the public policy. We want there to be an independent commission, just like there was in a 9/11 commission. And we've been organizing Katrina survivors that are here in hotels, and we've been pushing the Bloomberg administration to get folks out of the hotels and, again, get them into housing. Working Families Party this year, going into the next several years, will be taking on the issue of health care. Health care for every New Yorker. Also, this will be in the city, sort of the year of the child in '06. We are going to push the city council to actually provide more daycare slots, to provide more funding, and to make sure that our children are taken care of.
Speaking of the city council, there's a controversy around term limits. I was one of the people who opposed term limits. I thought the best way of limiting your term is to come out and vote if you don't like somebody. But I don't want to put you on the spot in terms of ACORN's position.
I don't mind.
What's your personal philosophy about term limits?
And let me just say, being an organizer, we were for term limits because you can get an entrenched body politic where people are there for 20 years and they're very secure. They really become unaccountable. The new, vibrant city council that we have now would not be there had it not been for term limits.
But now they want to eliminate term limits.
But you see, whether you agree with term limits or not, the people have spoken. Now you can.
But they try to get the people to change.
And I really do think, personally, because I'm not going to speak for all of our members, that is quite a troubling position to take, knowing full well that none of them would have been there without term limits, knowing full well that we've been able to get more progressive legislation because people had to be accountable because they knew that someone was on their heels. Now, if you want to fiddle with it, you need to bring it back to the people. It's been voted on twice, city council members, and any move to undo what has been voted on twice, to me, seems to be a bit cynical. However, they're welcome to try, as long as the people get to voice it.
Their argument is that in this brief 4 8-year period, they are just beginning to learn the mechanisms of government and the relationships, etc. And as one who's worked with legislators, congresspeople, etc., it is sometimes difficult to re-educate somebody who's chairman of X committee that you've been working with.
Absolutely.
Because democracy is never perfect, and that's maybe one of the problems that comes about. And then the other argument is that many of them are looking for their next job, so therefore they tend to favor certain particular positions.
Well,
this is life, however.
It is life, but I think, there was also this notion that this is public service.
Right.
This is not a guaranteed job for you. Right. It should not be a job. If it is a job, then I think you need to get out. If you're saying that the learning curve needs to be a little bit longer, I might take some exception to that. Because the thing is, when you stand up to run for public office, either you know some rudimentary things about how that office works, or you don't. If you're going to say, well, I just got elected and I want to learn everything, maybe you should have reconsidered that. But part of why organizations like ACORN and organizations like the Working Families Party and unions, they really do train people in how to represent their constituents. There's all kinds of institutes where people can go to learn the ins and outs. And I would posit that maybe the learning curve is so long because it is in the best interest of lobbyists and other powerful people. I think there could be a sort of, downsizing of the labyrinth that people go through.
But speaking of lobbying, the mother's milk of politics is money.
Oh.
And the issues that you talked about, housing, health care, education, all relate to public money being used for the public.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the arguments that's often given by the business community is that if you raise the taxes so high that the business community will not stay and will go somewhere else, and therefore you will not have as many jobs, and you have a cycle downward. Now, and particularly since New York State and New Jersey are some of the most highly taxed places in the country, they also have some of the best social services. How do you resolve that in your discussions with the power brokers and the business community?
Well, taxes are a good thing. I mean, that's what government is about. You tax folks so that you can provide for the common good. Taxes should be fair, and they should be progressive. But to automatically...
By progressive, you mean the more you make, the more you pay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Commit your fair
But in
share.
terms of a corporation, they say, well, look, if I have to pay so much in taxes, I won't be able to put it into redeveloping my business.
Well, there's been many studies that beg to differ with this, because some of these corporations are making hundreds of millions of dollars and are paying their CEOs and their management teams so much money.
And their stockholders a lot of money.
The stockholders a lot of money.
Are the people.
They'll say the same thing, that, oh, we can't raise wages. We can't give out benefits. Now, which is it?
Well, how do you get that across to the public? Because the general public says, look, I don't want to pay more taxes.
Sure.
And they realize that they don't realize that they're paying a small amount of tax and the corporations pay most of it.
If people would pay their fair share, there would, we would level that out. Also, what we use our tax dollars for. ACORN and other organizations like ours say, if the government gives away hundreds, sometimes billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies, the public needs to get something back for that. You want to use taxes and tax credits and tax relief as an incentive for the public good. For instance, if you are going to give away tax breaks for housing development, there needs to be a substantial portion of that housing that is affordable, yes, truly affordable. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be giving away subsidies for all kinds of development, and this town is boom town in terms of development, people need to be able to give back in terms of community benefits to schools, to other organizations that are in that community. So we need to get something for that.
Well, it has been alleged that the financial activity in New York City over the past 15 or 20 years has brought back the city. But one of the concerns that many of us have is that we have a two-class city.
Exactly.
We have a city where we have more millionaires than any place in the country and more upscale people, but exactly, we also have a city where 25% of the people are in below, I think it's
below
now
the poverty line.
Below the poverty line. So how do we educate the public at large? Clearly, minority voters are the majority of the voters in the city, yet many times we see them voting for candidates
That's right,
who may not be in their own interest.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you deal with that?
Well, you've hit on several issues. One of the reasons, again, that we formed the Working Families Party is so that there is an alternative political vehicle that people can actually use, where that little piece of real estate shows what your values are, what you're holding people accountable to, whether it's, you know, fair taxation, whether it is more affordable housing, or, you know, more benefits or education. You need to be able to, as I always say, not get lost in the Democratic sauce. People need to see those numbers. Number two, this city is now largely black and brown. Mm-hmm. And so progressive whites and people of color need to stand together in order to move the social policies that we care about. Because otherwise, we will have a city that is even more polarized.
Well, New Orleans is a classic example.
Absolutely,
That was such dramatic difference between the haves and the have-nots. But let's talk about developing leadership.
Right.
We're talking about we need young people, we need informed people. What's ACORN and other groups doing to help develop indigenous leadership so they can move into the political process?
Well, number one, organize, organize, organize. And I've said it on your show before. The profession of organizing, I believe, is the most dangerous job and the most glorious job that you can do in this country.
Well, we
want to raise up, you know, but it's hard work.
You can't do this in 3 minutes, but what are some of the keys to organization that you want people to deal with?
What we want folks to do is, number one, if you have an issue, you need to get with other folks. Mm-hmm. There needs to be collective action. There needs, you know, to be a collective issue that will not only benefit you personally, but will help with others. We need to have more and more young people, as well as older people, get back to organizing. During the civil rights era, you know, people risk their lives as organizers. Sometimes we don't have that today, but we need more people going into to organizing, and we need folks to join organizations, any organization. It doesn't matter. You need to be able to join folks and do collective action.
As you mentioned, older people, the AARP has become one of the greatest lobbying groups, and a part of their mantra is to help people to learn to volunteer.
Learn to volunteer, learn to organize other folks. Organizing just means that you take responsibility to talking to your friends and your neighbors and joining together to get something done. And you don't have to be polite. You can make demands as opposed to requests.
But there's a technique to doing that. We've seen all kinds of leaders that turn people off. There's some that motivate them, and some that do not.
Some people are, they're not organizers, they're mobilizers. As I've said through the years, ACORN will organize door to door. We're knocking on doors every day. We're looking for folks in those neighborhoods who take leadership roles. Some people didn't even know that they could be leaders, but leaders are identified by people that can follow them. When you do a campaign, maybe you're fighting to get the potholes fixed in the street. Through that fight, you learn to have a legal strategy and a political strategy and a direct action street strategy. You learn the responsibilities of leadership. You learn who your elected officials are and what power they have. You also learn how, if we need a bill, what would you want in the bill? So through organizing and collective action, you learn by experience, and you surface leaders straight out of the neighborhoods.
As we come to the close of the show, could you give us the telephone number so that anybody who wants to get into this could contact ACORN?
So it's 718-246-7900. That's 718-246-7900. And people just need to remember that the people united can never be defeated.
Okay, thanks so much to Berth Lewis, the Executive Director of ACORN, for such a stimulating discussion about organize. The key to it is organize, organize, organize.